Welcome to a snowy edition of Trade Talks. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. We bring the show to you live, rain, sleet, or snow. Joining me this afternoon at MarketSite is Sam Pierson. He's the Director of Securities Finance over IHS Markit. Sam, thank you very much for joining us. Apparently, you make it happen in the snow, too.
Yeah.
Show must go on, right?
Me.
So let's talk about what is Securities Finance data?
Yeah, so Securities Finance data is global securities lending, the corporate bonds, government bonds, equities, ADRs, ETFs, and the inventory and loans for those securities. So the inventory is currently a little over 20 trillion and the loans are about 2.5 trillion.
So who uses this kind of data and what would you use it for?
So across the board, in large global financial institutions, so you have global custodians, broker-dealers, hedge funds, other large asset managers, and they're using it to benchmark their securities lending performance. So for asset owners, that means comparing yourself against your peers. For borrowers of securities, be they prime brokers or hedge funds, that means comparing your rates to make sure you're getting the best available borrows. And then another salient point for us at IHS Markit is that the borrows comprise basically a daily short interest metric.
So what trends have emerged in this kind of data recently?
So one thing that's interesting after last year where retail was really painted with a broad negative brush and there was some severe underperformance, we've started to see some covering. And so it's a profitable trade that may be reaching its end. In the US, mall REITs, both the equities themselves and the related bonds, short balances have come off significantly this year. And in Europe, retail is the most covered sector that we've seen so far this year.
So this kind of data can also help you make a more broad macro investment decision as well, is what it sounds like.
Yeah, definitely. So you can aggregate it up and look at sectors or countries and see how short balances are changing, get a view on investor sentiment. So it's a quant factor that they'll use, and then also on going all the way down to an individual security level to get a view on whether hedge funds are thinking, short this security or asset class.
So is securities lending, is that only for equities?
No, so there's also corporate bonds, government bonds. We've seen recently the high yield related ETFs and underlying corporate bonds having an increase in demand and being basically at the peak that they've been post-crisis.
All right, so is there anything else that we should know, because blockchain kind of always finds its way into these conversations? What are you learning about the data as it relates to blockchain?
Absolutely. So last year there was a lot of that speculative kind of froth towards the end of the year. A lot of short sellers came in. Similar to the pot stocks, we're way off of the highs. No pun intended. And we're, so there's kind of starting to be a differentiation of results. You have some of the payment-related stocks like Square doing really well. You have some of the pure kind of more speculative angles like Riot blockchain or Long blockchain that have done poorly. The short interest across the board has remained relatively high. And then you have something like Overstock that's kind of in limbo, but again, the short sellers have remained present.
And I just want to go back to it one more time for the audience to understand. I just want you to explain again the different ways that this data can be used and how, let's say, asset managers, for example, use this for their investment decisions.
Yeah, so you can see basically what people are doing in terms of buying and selling securities. So the inventory we have reflects the securities that are being put into lending programs by the large asset managers.
Right. And
then the borrows against that reflect the short sales.
So it's like a bird's eye look of how institutional trading is perhaps thinking.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a long-short metric that you can look at globally across asset classes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us at
Awesome.
MarketSite
Thank you.
today. And traders, thank you for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq.